Hey everyone, welcome back to the Gut Girls podcast. We're diving into a topic that every woman experiences, but almost nobody talks about. So it's emotional eating. And today's title is Emotional Eating, Why You Deserve Rest, Not Chips. So, we're not talking about the kind of hunger that builds slowly throughout the day, guys. We're talking about the kind that hits at night when the house is finally quiet and your brain whispers, you deserve something. In fact, I just had a consultation with a client of ours about this exact topic. And so we hear this all the time. What I just said, like one of my clients will say, hey, I eat because I feel like I deserve this. And in that conversation, you know what my response was? It was, yes, you do deserve something in that moment. You know, I'm a mom too, and a lot of our listeners are moms, and it's like, yes, you do deserve that. After the kids have gone down and there's a quiet moment and you're reaching for something. But what Diana and I are going to talk about today is it's not the chips, guys. So that's really not what your body is asking for. What you really deserve in that moment is a moment to breathe, to be put off of duty, responsibilities put off, and honestly, just to be held, instead of being pulled in a million and one directions. And so that's what we're diving into today, and I'm so excited about it.
I know, me too. It's, emotional eating really isn't about the food for most people. It's really about what the food represents. It's like you said just a minute ago, it's the end of the day, just this moment of relief. Most of the time that you feel like maybe I can just have just a second by myself to eat these chips or crackers or whatever it is. And it feels like that's kind of the only few seconds that you just have to yourself before the chaos starts back again. And so a lot of times the women that we work with are not necessarily out of the control, but they're overeating because they're either overwhelmed, they're overstimulated, they're underrested, they just aren't feeling 100%. And so today we do want to kind of dive into what the difference between the real biological hunger and the emotional hunger, what that really looks like, and how the gut drives those cravings and what to do in the moment when you're like feeling that overwhelmed, because we all feel overwhelmed. I mean, right before you and I started this podcast, we were talking about the day. I was running, almost 15 minutes late today. It just happens. And so it's like, how do we manage all of that?
Yeah, exactly. So, okay, let's start with biological hunger, because once you understand this, emotional hunger becomes much easier to spot. And I think that's just it, right? We're going to teach you how to become aware because that's the first step. So, biological hunger shows up gradually, okay? So, remember this. This is key. It's more steady, it's rational, and it's not urgent. I know that hunger, because for me I've been able to be like, okay, so I'm starting to get hungry. What do I actually want, right? Like I have time to think about what I'm going to be making for dinner. I've got time to gather ingredients. So it's more like your stomach might growl, right? Like that's like one of the biological cues. Your stomach might rumble, your stomach might growl, and then food starts sounding appealing. So like I said, it's slow. But you're not fixated on a specific item, right? Like you could eat leftovers, you could eat a full meal, you could eat what's easy. It doesn't matter when it's biological hunger, right? Biological hunger comes from the body saying, fuel me, versus emotional hunger, on the other hand, which doesn't come from the stomach at all, you guys. It comes from the nervous system. So, that's like a big, let me say that one more time. Biological hunger comes from the stomach, okay? The emotional hunger comes from the nervous system. I think that's huge. And so it's more urgent, right? The nervous system, when it speaks, I mean, it sounds different. So it's more urgent, it's more specific. And it usually appears, like Diana said, when you finally sit down and you're like, okay, now that I'm still, I can finally feel everything that I've been ignoring all day long.
It's so interesting, just like you said, that emotional hunger feels like kind of this sudden surge and almost like a craving mixed with a panic, right? And so when you use the word panic, you and I, we talk to our clients all the time. We're like, ding, 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 that's the nervous system, right?
Exactly.
And so you want that one thing, and not just food, but that specificity is the giveaway. and you're not thinking, I might be hungry. You're thinking, I need chips right now.
Salty
right?
chips, right?
Salty chips, or like, I can't relax. I have to have something right now. And so that emotional hunger shows up like at very unpredictable times versus the biological hunger. And so sometimes it's late in the afternoon when the kids go to bed. And let's be honest, like you probably just had dinner, 90 minutes before or something like that. And so are you actually hungry, or is that emotional eating because you're finally getting a second by yourself? So when you finally get that moment, it is less about nourishment and it's more about just transitioning out of that stress mode, because that food is kind of that bridge between the tension that you feel in this chaotic mode, like we gotta do bath time, we gotta do bedtime, or if you have kids or whatever, or if you're working, you're constantly working. I'm making phone calls, I'm constantly answering emails right up until the time you get, and then you finally get out of this stressful mode and you're like, okay, now I need my salty chips.
Yeah, I mean, that's so good that you kind of gave the different scenarios for different lifestyles and different seasons of life. So, another thing I think to remember is the difference becomes even more clear when you pause before eating. So, Diana and I talk a lot about this, like the mindful part of eating. So, if you stop for 1 minute and check in and the craving fades, then it wasn't hunger after all. So biological hunger doesn't go away in 60 seconds, right? It's an actual hunger, where emotional hunger does go away. So that's why we say, like, pause, give yourself a breath. Ask yourself, what do you really need right now? And then that's going to also be your cue of, oh, this is my nervous system, or this is actually my stomach and I need to eat. And then here's the other clue. Emotional eating rarely leads to satisfaction. I can tell you moments where I've just ate and like a whole bag has been gone and I'm like, oh, how did that happen? You know what I mean? Like, we can all relate to that, right? So you don't graze and snack and keep going, and you still don't feel that like moment because the food didn't meet the need, right? It's like you've got at the end of the bag and you're just like, I'm still hungry. Or better yet, nowadays people are working and still eating. So like they're working behind their computer. So they just ate lunch and then they're like, what else did I bring? What else is here? And it's like, well, that's actually not hunger. That was you worked your way through lunch, right? So that's also a cue. So really, like I said, it wasn't that the food met the need. And when that happens, then the need wasn't food in the beginning. So this is where Diana and I really today, we want you to take home that what was the need? The need was rest. The need was actually space. The need was actually comfort or grounding. So this goes back to that moment when you're eating lunch behind a computer and your lunch is gone and you're still hungry. Even then, I would ask you guys that are listening to the podcast, stop and be like, okay, so what actually do I need right now? Do I need to go outside? Like, do I just need to get up away from my computer, take a break? Do I need space from my coworkers? Do I need space from my computer? Do I need to go outside? Because most likely you've been operating in survival mode all day long. So your body just needs a break, right, Diana?
It really does. And, something about emotional eating, it's actually incredibly resourceful. Your body is kind of doing the best that it can with the tools that it has. And so food, feels reliable, it's accessible, it's socially acceptable too, right? And, it doesn't require any planning. You just go grab it because it provides you that really quick relief. But we know that it's a short-term solution. And so understanding the difference between those two can really kind of help you understand, like, it's not, instead of like, I have no willpower, you start asking, was that exactly what I needed in that moment? You start asking those questions and really become super empowered, right? And so that question alone can change everything. Just like you said, when you take that moment to pause, it's like, is this about willpower or am I in control of what I'm about to put in my mouth?
Mm-hmm. And Diana, I'm curious, take us back. I've heard you talk about this before in your own story, but there was a specific time in your story where you did have a lot, probably more emotional eating. So tell us about that time.
Well, if I take you back even into 2009, 2010. My mom was on hospice care, and I was going, we mentioned this in my story when I did my whole story. So you could go all the way back to episode 1 and 2 if you want to hear the whole thing. But I was struggling with infertility. My mom was on hospice care. I wasn't able to get pregnant after many years of trying. And my mom passed away in October of 2009. And from October 2009 until December 2009, in a very short period of time, I gained 15 pounds. And then I found out I finally got pregnant at that point, and the scale just kept climbing. And you want to talk about emotional eating? 100%. That's what it was. I was not listening to my body. I didn't understand. I just didn't know. Nobody had educated me and taught me the difference in what biological hunger meant and what, the stress eating or the emotional eating was like. And so, if I would have had these tools then to help me understand and really help me, all the tools that we teach now in Gut Girls, man, I do wish I could go. I don't, you try not to live with regrets, right? But I do wish that I could go back in time and say to myself, hey, Diana, you're in control of what you decide to eat. You do not need a bowl of mint chocolate chip ice cream every single night. You just don't. And that's not what's truly going to satisfy you. That's not what's going to feed you. That's not what's going to feed your baby. But, I didn't know. And that doesn't necessarily mean that we're saying you can't ever have a bowl of mint chocolate chip ice cream. But, every night, I was eating for emotional reasons, obviously. When I look back, it is part of my story, so it is what it is, right? And now I feel so blessed that I get to share that, and I hope that it makes a difference in somebody's life that's listening, where you can start to learn those cues between the difference in what emotional eating is, because that's not going to be what fulfills you. I can promise you that from experience, and what the difference between what actual hunger means.
Yeah, I've heard you talk before in some of our live calls that when you journaled, and even, you encourage our clients today, journal how you feel after a meal, because I bet after that bowl of mint chocolate chip ice cream, I bet you didn't feel energized and at your best mentally and emotionally. I bet you didn't, but you always tell our clients, journal, and after 30 minutes, 90 minutes after that meal, write down how it made you feel. And I think that's a really good way too, to know okay, so was that really hunger or was that emotional hunger? Because emotional hunger will just leave you still feeling flat, right? Where actual nutrient dense food that you needed, that your body actually craved, that biological hunger, it's going to feed you the energy to be thinking, the energy to be active, the energy to be present, right, Diana?
It really does. It's so interesting. And, now here we are, this is going to air right around the holidays, right? And, there's so much emotion that goes into this time of year. A lot of times, this is a super happy time of year for a lot of people, where they get together with their family and their friends, and they do all these things and they love it. But man, I can tell you, it can be really stressful if you have a bunch of parties to go to and you have to buy a dirty Santa present for this and do that, and all the different things. And then there are some people that this time of year, they're missing people. They're very lonely, don't have people. And, I would urge you to really kind of tune in and check in with yourself when you reach for that bag of chips. If you're alone, really try to decide whether or not that's going to serve you well, or if you're just eating for emotion, and find some other maybe habit or something that you could do that would replace that eating, whether it being a puzzle, or anything like that. That's just the first thing that came to my mind. But there can be so many different things that can kind of replace that, some, prayer, whatever, writing in your journal, whether you're writing what you're eating or just writing about what you feel or whatever, can make such a difference. And I know for some people that sounds so kind of corny, and they're like, that's not going to help me. But I can promise you that eating that bowl of chocolate chip ice cream every single night because I was missing my mom, that did not serve me well either.
Mm-hmm. It's true. And so there's so many things you touched upon. We're actually gonna give some steps as to some of the things you mentioned are great. We're gonna give some additional steps of what to replace this emotional eating habit with. But before we do, you guys know we love the gut, and we read a lot of GI maps. And so let's kind of dive into the gut for a second, and how this emotional eating and the gut kind of work together. So no one honestly typically understands that connection, the emotional eating in the gut, and that's what I want to speak to. There's certain bacteria in the gut that actually influence cravings. So Diane and I often have said, like, it's not about willpower. If you're the type of person that's like, I have zero willpower, no, nobody has willpower. Let's be honest. There's certain bacteria that actually crave, like, maybe more carbs, more sugar, and those bacteria can take over. So if you have dysbiosis, which is an overgrowth of bacteria, if you have low enzymes to where you're not breaking down the food that you're eating, if you've got chronic inflammation or poor stomach acid, these are all things that we see on the GI map. If you have those, your body may not be able to absorb nutrients well. So even after eating, your brain gets this message like, we didn't get what we needed. So it doesn't matter, guys, like, about the willpower. You could have anything in front of you. You could eat the cleanest meal, right? And yet your body could still be like, I'm hungry, right? And so that's not necessarily let me say it this way. The message shows up as a craving, right? But not hunger. It's a craving. So when you have those cravings, that's typically some kind of dysbiosis. So then if you add stress to that, which, goodness gracious, we live in a world of stress, the dopamine level drops even further down. Okay, so now your brain is scanning for the quickest dopamine fix that it can find. And guess what? That's typically going to end up looking like carbs and sugar, anything that's fast, anything that's cheap. So that's, takeout, that's drive through, that's a dopamine hit, right? So now you guys can see where it's actually a vicious cycle of emotional eating and cravings that's actually being drawn up from the dysbiosis in your gut. Isn't that crazy to think about?
It's wild. And this is why emotional eating, it's not a character flaw. It's a biochemical response, right? We see that in the gut. Just like you said, you use the word dysbiosis. And for our listeners that may not know what that means, it's just basically your gut microbiome being out of balance, right? Your gut isn't digesting properly, just as Angela said just a minute ago. So, your amino acids are not there and being digested and absorbed well into the system to build up the dopamine and the serotonin. So your brain starts reaching for these external things, trying to fulfill what it needs internally. And so if your microbiome is imbalanced or have dysbiosis or skewed, whatever word you want to use for that, these bacteria can literally kind of almost ask for what they want. And so that's where sometimes those sugar or carb cravings come in to feed those bacteria. And so once you combine that sugar craving, that carb craving, whatever, and you combine that with the nervous system, which we talk about all the time, it feels, and your nervous system is in that sympathetic state where it's just constantly in this stressed out mode. It feels impossible to ignore that feeling, right? And so it's not necessarily willpower, it's actually physiology.
It's so true. I'll bounce off that and say this. So the solution is support the gut, right? And regulate the nervous system. And so I say that, and I think a lot of you are like, what does that even mean? And I get it. Diana actually does a great job at breaking this down. But to answer that fully, let's go into like replacement rituals. Okay. So what can you replace this emotional eating habit with? So we're not going to tell you like, just distract yourself, because that honestly doesn't work for a very long time. The core emotion, if your core emotion is I deserve something, then give yourself something that truly meets that need, not a quick distraction. That's like where the cell phone, I think, can also become a vital part of emotional eating, because we just scan to get that quick dopamine fix on like Instagram or something. But guys, it's not. You need something peaceful, easy, and doable that gives you the same feeling of relief, like a pause. It's like a softening. I often describe it as like a pocket of space. I'm a mom, so I feel like sometimes what I need is just space. And so here's the magic. If the craving disappears once you do the ritual, it wasn't hunger, It was a request for rest. So maybe just write that down. If the craving disappears once you do the ritual, then it wasn't hunger after all. It was a request of your nervous system for actual rest.
Yeah, and I kind of laugh about thinking about what I do because when I said puzzle, I never ever build a puzzle. So I have no idea why I said that.
That's
But that
like
was the first thing that came to
the other version of you that's like, I do. Your subconscious is like, I'm gonna get you a puzzle for Christmas. So
I know. That's hilarious. I'm like, maybe I should start doing puzzles. I don't know. But there's a couple of things that I do. One of the things that I love to do is honestly just to go outside, even when it's cold, because I hate cold weather. But a lot of times just going outside and breathing in some fresh air and, just like almost kind of thinking about all the blessings in your life, being grateful. And you can also do, you guys know that I drink bone broth. Some people sip on tea, something like that. I have even heard of people going to do yoga, like if they're feeling, honestly, they're like, I just feel like I need to eat all the time, then I'm going to go exercise, and just doing some kind of simple stretching. One of the things that I have actually been doing recently, you guys know that I have an infrared sauna I've shared on here before. And for those of you that are going to ask, because everybody always asks, the brand is Sunlight and Sauna. And so when I feel this way, honestly, I'll go into the sauna and it's a 2-seater, so I can kind of lay down and then I put my legs up on the wall. So I'm recirculating sort of that old blood back into the system a little bit. And man, you want to talk about relaxing? That feels so good to do that because I'm sitting there like sweating it out and just like recycling those old feelings and so I can just sit and pray and just think. And so I love that feeling of just like almost like a refresher and new. And I can tell you this, like after I do that ritual, we'll call it a ritual or a habit. Once I get back out of the sauna, I am not interested in going and eating a big bowl of ice cream or, eating chips or something like that. I feel very fulfilled in that moment. So there's so many different ways that you can really do that. And so I think once I get out of the sauna, I think that was really what my body needed. It was really needing that nervous system reset and not some bowl of ice cream or chips or whatever. So I actually fed it what it needed, which is a nervous system reset.
Yeah, I think it's beautiful. Dinah, I would say the mission behind what we do in general as Gut Girls is really to help women learn to pause and check in their body, because your body is constantly speaking to you, but we tend to just ignore that language. As a mom, I've said it to many of my clients of like, imagine if your child was sitting there just trying its hardest to tell you something and you just couldn't understand it. It's frustrating for both of you. It's frustrating for the child. It's frustrating for you. And that's what that's you and your body on a daily basis. There's so much tension in your body because your body's trying to tell you something and you're trying to understand it, but you don't know how. And so with what we do at the Gut Girls, it goes beyond just emotional eating. Like we help you understand the language of your body so that you can have that moment like Diana has when she gets out of the sauna where it's like, oh, this is what I needed. And wow, what a moment. Imagine like hugging your child in that moment and being like, whew, I figured out what you needed. And like now we're both at peace. You're just doing it for yourself and we deserve that. And so that's like, it goes back to the title of this podcast. Like, yes, you deserve something, but it's typically not the chip. It's almost like showing up for yourself, right? Like reparenting, showing up, whatever you want to call it. It's just a moment of showing up for yourself. And I think, it's interesting, but you guys all know that like I turned 40 this year, but something else is in my, I have a wonderful counselor that I see like every 2 weeks. And just as a woman, I'm sharing this because I think a lot of you probably have been asked this question where I remember once she looked at me and she was like, so what do you want? Like, as a woman, don't we often like be like, would someone just ask me what I want? And then someone suddenly asked me like, okay, Angela, but what do you want? And I was like, oh, like I have like that. I can't answer that. Like in that moment, I was like, I can't answer that right now because I actually haven't slowed down enough to even ask myself. And normally it's all the things we hear from clients, Diana, right? They're like, I'm doing the massage. I'm going to get this treatment. I'm doing this and this and this. And it's like, Diana and I kind of cringe sometimes because we're like, those are amazing therapies. They're so good and they can help. But your body's actually craving something even deeper than that. Like, that's going to end up just being a band-aid if you don't actually learn the language of your body to know the root of it, right, Diana? So this is like even beyond emotional eating today. This is like what we do. This is our passion, right?
It is. And going back to kind of what you said, we talked about a little bit about the science of it, and you use the word dysbiosis and the imbalance. And, we work with kids a lot. We actually work with kids both together through Gut Girls and then through our other businesses that we do, with you with chiropractic and me with, with supplements and nutrition support that I do through my store. And, talking to a lot of moms about their kids, you really hit something, you really hit the nail on the head when you were talking about how the kids can't really explain what they want. They just like want a snack, or they're whiny or whatever. And a lot of times it's for them, it's that nervous system reset. So really that's what we're all kind of craving is, figuring out that nervous system reset. And then what happens is, just like you said, if we really need to dive deeper and really look at the gut, that's when the GI map test does such a great job, where we can actually pinpoint some of those stressors that's coming into play and that you can't really overcome, right? Because we said that was the science behind it. And so that's where finding that good balance, that good healthy balance comes in.
Yeah. So we'll kind of wrap this up, but guys, if emotional eating feels like it's running your day, we want you to hear this. Like, nothing is wrong with you. Absolutely not. Your body is not misbehaving. It's not broken. It's literally just communicating. So emotional eating is simply your gut and your nervous system asking for support in a different way. So when you learn how to regulate them, cravings become easier, gentler, and definitely less intense. And it's not because you're restricting, which is the beautiful part. You're not restricting yourself, but because your body actually feels safe.
Yeah. And like you said before, that's what we love to do as Gut Girls. We love to help walk you through that. You and I constantly do that for each other. You guys are probably just listening and not looking at the screen, but I'm pointing to her because we do this for each other all the time. And so we want you to be a part of our community. If you'd like to be a part of the Gut Girls community, the best way to do that is through our membership. We are currently actively involved in, just being totally transparent, some changes in our website and creating some great resources for you guys inside our membership. So the best way to get in touch with us right now is to go to our website, gutgirls.health, and book a free 15-minute assessment. And we would love to get you started and to be a part of your journey. The Gut Girls podcast is for educational purposes only and is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease. We are not acting as licensed medical professionals. Always consult your doctor before making any changes to your health routine.